Folks, I was kind of holding up for our town attorney. He's on the way. He should be here any minute, but it is 6:30, so we'll get started. You're walking in? All right, we'll have a roll call. Melissa?
Yes, sir. Mayor Owens?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Selby?
Here.
Commissioner Borland?
Here.
Commissioner Collins?
Here.
Commissioner Mann?
Here.
Commissioner Stetson?
Here.
Commissioner Wickstrom?
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Can we have a moment of silent meditation, please? Okay, how about the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, we have to have a motion for adoption of the agenda.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adoption of the agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Noes? The ayes have it. Okay. Melissa?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on your agenda is employee introduction, and I'm actually going to stand at the podium to do this. There we go. Now it's on. Usually we do employee introductions at the mid-month meeting, but tonight I thought that prior to you authorizing Ms. Dowdy to be a check signer on your consent agenda, that perhaps you'd like to meet her in person. So we are thrilled to welcome Heather Dowdy here to town staff as our finance director. She brings incredible talent. She lives here in Manteo. She has 2 children. We are thrilled to have her on board. She has hit the ground running, and I know she's going to do great for the town and for you all as the board here. And so we just want to welcome Heather, and we're thrilled to have you. Welcome.
Congratulations. Welcome aboard. All right.
Mr. Mayor, the next item on your agenda is item 5, the consent agenda.
Okay. You want to describe it?
I'm sorry?
You want to describe the consent agenda?
Sure.
Tell the people the ground rules?
Sure. So 5A is approval of the minutes from your regular meeting on March 2nd. Item 5B is approval of your minutes for the recess meeting from March 16th. Item 5C is Dare County Tourism Board Fireworks Project Grant. Item 5D is updates to check signing authority and disbursements of funds.
All right.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. The motion and a second to the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes seem to have it. The consent agenda is passed.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the recess meeting on March 16th.
Second.
All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we can go on to public comment at this point since you
Yeah.
all adopted the consent
Yeah.
agenda. So the next item, item 6 on the agenda, is public comment. Members of the public are invited to address the Board of Commissioners on any topic. Public comment is not intended to require the board to answer any impromptu questions or to take any actions on items brought up during this period. Speakers will address all the comments to the board as a whole and not one individual. Discussions between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Time limits are 3 minutes per person or 5 minutes per group. Please come forward to the lectern and identify yourself so your statements can be recorded. I'd note that if you are speaking for a group, please provide the name of the group. Additionally, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to take a second because we've got a few hearings here on the agenda tonight. So if you are here to speak about the topic of housing, because we do have a public hearing on our agenda, the next item on the agenda would be the appropriate time to speak. And then if you are here to talk about the change of use at 716 South Highway 64, that is also later on the agenda. So if you're here to talk about those two items, now would not be the time to offer your public comment. So we're ready to roll.
Okay, Melissa, if you will, you'll monitor that you just mentioned.
Yes,
about
sir.
the public comment period. All right, now it's time for public comment period.
Sarah Benson, 309 Agona Street, Manteo, North Carolina. Mayor Owens, commissioners, town manager, and friends. Have you ever wanted to go to a fun event, meet some neighbors, and do a good thing for your town? If the answer is maybe, well, I've got the place for you to come and do that. If the answer is yes, I've already done that before, you know the answer to Town of Manteo Spring Litter Pickup. And guess when it's going to be? I know you can't respond, so I'll say it for you. April 30th, 2022, donuts, 8:45, coffee, hot chocolate for the kids. If you want to be around some lively kids, you should come. And they are not talking any trash about it either. It's going to be from 9 to 11, and we promise there will not be any snakes anywhere for you to have to wrestle with. It's going to be a great event. It always is. And Frankie and Barry and I and Michelle and Melissa, we got a bet going. It's going to be the best turnout ever with the least amount of trash, but the most surprising trash. So come.
Thank you, Ms. Benson.
Hi, I'm Catherine Fagan. I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters, of which I'm a member, and I am bringing the Citizens Guide, and we wanted to let people in the town know that we are here, and the Citizens Guide gives you all the pertinent information. It tells you who all your commissioners are, all your townspeople, where the schools are, where your public health facilities are. Gives a lot of important information. It is not a partisan organization. It is, in fact, it strives to be very much nonpartisan. It strives to give information because the two most important duties you have as a citizen is one, jury duty. I know y'all hate that, but one, jury duty. Don't ask me how to get out. And secondly, to be an informed voter. And the League of Women Voters seeks to make the citizens or give the citizens the tools to become or to be an informed voter. So I'm going to leave some of them here at the table with Ms. Melissa, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Owens, Commissioners. My name is Willow Kelly. I'm the CEO of the Outer Banks Association of Realtors, located in Nags Head. I'm here with one of our board members, Rosemarie Dozier. Just to let you know, the association now has over 1,200 members in residential, commercial sales, property management, as well as lenders, insurers, appraisers, inspectors, and other affiliate members. The Board of Directors recently approved several initiatives set forth by the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force on fair housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's why I'm here. We would like to make you aware that this coming Monday, April 11th, marks the 54th anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act. The Outer Banks Association of Realtors is committed to ensuring that all prospective buyers, sellers, and tenants are treated fairly and equally without discrimination. To bring further attention to fair housing, we ask that you please join us in working to end housing discrimination by proclaiming April as Fair Housing Month. I had a copy of a proclamation that has been distributed to you. I know you don't take any action today, perhaps at your mid-month meeting, but perhaps consider that declaring April 2022 as Fair Housing Month in the town of Manteo as an inclusive community committed to fair housing and to promoting appropriate activities by private and public entities to provide and educate for equal housing opportunities for all residents and prospective residents of the town of Manteo. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share this with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Willa.
Are there further comments?
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Tim Teeple. I live at 410 Devon Street in Manteo. You could say I'm talking for a group because the group is a bunch of citizens that live in this multi-use area downtown and also some business owners. I've talked on this matter 3 times now, sometimes in planning board and also to you guys as well. As the mixed use permit at 100 Old Tom Street. Whenever it was first brought to you guys, it was to change the ordinance to make it into an all-in-one apartment complex. Due to a loophole or the way that the wordage is, it does allow for a hotel because as a hotel, it says suggested retail. Knowing the person who actually wrote these intentions, I know that the intent was not a full-on hotel on the bottom level and apartments on the upstairs level. This starts a precedence of many things going on downtown. It does not stop other retail shops from closing their doors and creating a hotel on the bottom. After all, if we start having all hotels downtown and residents above, we lose our downtown. And that's something that we have fought many, many years to do. It does not stop some of the traffic problems. The on-site facility allows 16 parking spots. However, there is now, since the hotel has to be a fire lane in front of the building, blocking some more added traffic. Also, it's projected, since it's 2 bedrooms, 2 bath, average household with 2 bedrooms, 2 bath normally has 2 cars, plus also the hotel down below. You are also looking at an average of about 40 cars in that small little area. And being somebody who's managed and lived in these multi-use buildings for many of years, while living downtown, helping my neighbors out, moving couches, and being the community that Old Town Village District is, I would ask that you guys please look at some of the things that I've stated today, such as the traffic, such as, is this really the intent of what this zoning was meant to be? You know, a lot of people have come to me and said, Tim, you've lost, they've won, get over it. But you know what, in my eyes, it's not a lose and win situation. It's a right and a wrong. And this could really change our downtown for the wrong. So my heart's with you guys. It's a big decision. But thank you very much for giving me your time.
Are there additional comments? Mr. Mayor, the next item on your agenda is item 7A, which is the public hearing on housing. And I have some comments to kind of hopefully help frame the discussion.
Go ahead.
And I will stand up again as I do this. You all requested a public hearing on the topic of housing, and before the public weighs in, I wanted to offer some things to consider and a few updates. You all have heard most of this before about the topic of housing, but I think it's important to be said again. The zoning ordinance is the direct outgrowth of an intensive and comprehensive long-range planning process that began in 1976 with the adoption of the town's first zoning ordinance. The current zoning ordinance was adopted on September 14th, 2005. In 2005, a new planning initiative resulted in the adoption of the Comprehensive Development Code, comprised of 5 documents: the 2005 Manteo Plan Update, the 2005 Design Guidelines, the Manteo Way of Building, the CAMA Land Use Plan, the Proposed Historic District Ordinance, and the 2005 Manteo Zoning Ordinance. These plans were developed with extensive citizen input solicited through surveys, charrettes, workshops, and public hearings, as well as the involvement of representatives from various community organizations and other governmental jurisdictions serving on task forces and steering committees. The Comprehensive Development Code provides a guide for decision-making based upon priorities identified by the community and adopted by the Manteo Board of Commissioners. The town has 7 zoning districts. 3 of the districts are strictly residential districts, and 4 of the districts are business districts. It is important to note that residential uses are allowed in business districts. And this table, I made it last year to help the planning board kind of visualize the differences in the dimensional requirements between the different zoning districts. The zoning map shows the districts and where they are located around town. The town of Manteo has worked on affordable housing for decades. In 1982, the town of Manteo Board of Commissioners voted in favor of a property exchange to sell town-owned property to Mr. John Wellens for low-income, elderly, and handicapped housing if they obtained 202 funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Today, we have Harbortown and Baytree because the town conducted this land exchange in 1982. In 2004, the town passed its affordable housing ordinance in the Code of Ordinances and later passed its inclusionary housing ordinance. Those ordinances offer density bonuses that state that shall be provided equal to 1 market rate unit or lot for each affordable housing unit or lot. Under no circumstance may a single-family lot contain less than 6,000 square feet unless approved by both the Planning Board and the Town Board of Commissioners. While the ordinance as it's written is not perfect, it has provided lot home packages to individuals who have met the income qualifications included in the ordinance in 3 subdivisions in Manteo. A comprehensive plan is required by the recent 160D legislation. The draft of the comprehensive plan has been made available, of the new comprehensive plan, has been made available on the town's website. The leadership group for the plan has been hard at work. As well, a number of community members have offered their input, and we are most grateful for each and every comment we receive. The comprehensive plan will continue to make its way through the process and come to the Board of Commissioners for adoption in a couple of months. Speaking of process, we've had a number of development applications make their way through the process provided by the ordinance. Tonight, we have hearings on 2 of those applications. Good Dog Retreat, which is not exactly housing, but will provide temporary housing for our 4-legged friends. Old Tom, mixed-use development at the site of the old Evans building. The Salt Meadow Landing mixed-use development will be back to the Planning Board next week with 44 proposed units and commercial units on the first level. The Quarter subdivision is an 8-lot subdivision that will be to the Board of Commissioners for consideration on May the 4th. We anticipate an updated site plan to amend the Marsh's Light special use permit, but are not in receipt of an updated plan at this time. While this public hearing is more on the general topic of housing, the request by the board for this hearing stemmed from conversations surrounding Dare County's plan to develop a site that they own off of California Lane surrounding the West Side Boat Ramp. Last week, Dare County announced its partnership with Woda Cooper Companies. Together, they will develop approximately 100 essential and workforce housing units at 2 separate sites, the site I just mentioned and a site in Nags Head. The press release explains that between 40 to 60 of the 100 units the county and Woda Cooper will build will be at Bowsertown. This update is different than the number of units mentioned when Mr. Outen attended the December 15th, 2021 meeting and presented on essential housing. This information that I share with you was released to the public last week by Dare County. At this point in time, we are not in receipt of any application regarding the County Woda Cooper proposed housing development. Mr. Mayor, that's the update from me, and I'll turn it back to you so we can hear from the public.
All right, where do we go, Melissa?
If there are people here that are here to speak on the general topic of
I
housing, we'd
mean,
love
this
to hear
is on,
from you
this is
now.
on affordable housing only at this time.
It's on housing, yes, sir.
Yeah.
In general.
I move to open the public hearing on the topic of housing.
Second.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion and second that we open public hearings on public housing. Let's go. I don't have any comments.
Hi, my name's Dave Stemple. I live at 815 Lindsay Lane in Manteo. And I know that the main thing on public housing that we're looking at is workforce housing and that type. But I also think what's really important is looking at the elderly and senior citizens of Manteo. We need housing for them. Assisted living would be great. All that we have is Bay Tree right now. And it would, when we think about things, we ought to look at senior citizen housing. Thank you very much.
Are there further comments?
I didn't plan, my name is Duke Garrity, I'm with the Outer Banks Home Builders Association. I didn't plan to speak tonight, but it's a conversation we've got to bring up. First of all, the town, the county, all of Dare County needs to determine what do we mean by affordable housing, workforce housing, essential housing. Are we looking at rentals? I worked a long time trying to see if I could get first-time home buyers into housing. Worked real hard because that's how you build wealth. But we don't seem to be doing that. Things that were reasonably priced 20, 30 years ago, they're not anymore. We got a very desirable area. People want to come here and they're willing to pay top dollar to come. So for this town, and I live in Manteo, but I live in the county. But what kind of housing are you looking for and where are you looking to put it? There's other towns that I've had this discussion with over the years. Well, we don't want that in our town. They've made the zoning so strict and the property values are too high, so we don't have any workforce in there. I'm in construction. I've been a builder for over 50 years, and I've never seen it like it is now where we can't get help. They say, well, there's no place for them to live, and I don't know what the answer is. Making plenty of money. When they talk about minimum wage or $15 an hour, we're paying $25 an hour for pretty much unskilled labor. So I'd like to know, and maybe the board will have to lead the discussion on this, but what are you looking for? And then see if that agrees with what the citizens want. But I've had this discussion over many different uses. I'm a big proponent of accessory dwelling units, and you've had that already. One of the first areas to put the ADUs into your ordinances years ago. You've got the tools, and then a project was brought to you from Dare County, and a good project, a little bit, had to be tweaked. It was a little bit overcrowded, but it was brought to you and you turned it down flat. No more discussion. Sometimes maybe you have to sit down and see where can you find common ground. Maybe this new realignment of the housing that they're bringing in will help. But we're at a critical stage. We can't get teachers, we can't get people to work in the hospital, and I'll be selfish, I need plumbers, and I need roofers, and they don't want to do it. So I just spoke now just to open up the conversation, and let's see where we go from that. But come up with a plan that you want, and what are you looking for? But we can't keep saying no. I've been hearing that for far too long. Thank you for your time.
Hello, once again, my name is Tim Teeple. I live in 420 Devon Street. I guess I'm going to get to talk about the past, because as the gentleman stated, our accessible dwelling was one of the first. Now, what has happened to that? You know, when it was first put in place, the owner of the property had to live at the property. It was not Airbnbs at this time. You know, until 5 years ago, we didn't really have a housing situation with our employees and with our workforce. I am one of them. You know, I have to every single year worry about my landlord going up in rent. I have to understand, I have to do the search, and luckily I know a lot of people in Manteo where they do understand what I do bring to this community, and it's why I'm able to stay. However, look at the past and look at what we have done. Whenever the accessible dwellings first came in, you could have them on your property because a lot of people came in and said, well, whenever our future comes, our kids are not going to be able to live here. Malcolm, you were a part of that debate as well. And so we allowed the accessible dwellings. Now what's happened is somebody buys the property and they look at it and they go, we have 2 Airbnb spots. So now we can do the Airbnbs. A lot of COAs and a lot of different housing divisions around the area are actually stopping the Airbnb situation. Asheville tried at one point. It is now spread to Raleigh and Chapel Hill, where they're trying to do something about their Airbnbs. I'm not saying that no Airbnbs are the answer, because it does bring a big population to this area. However, there is a balancing scale, and that's what we need to figure out. Because if we don't have the workers, nobody's going to want to come to a place that they can't get food, can't get services, or anything that our seasonal and me are able to give our visitors. So I would ask for everybody to please look at the past and what we have done and what has failed. Because there's no point in looking to the future unless we look at the past and realize what we have already tried. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Willow Kelly with the Outer Banks Association of Realtors, but I'm also going to talk to you personally. 13 years experience with the Outer Banks Home Builders Association and the Outer Banks Association of Realtors as the Government Affairs Director. 8 years before that, heading up the Currituck Chamber of Commerce, and 4 years in my position heading up the association. Housing has been a topic of conversation since I began in 1999 in that position in Currituck. It's not a town of Manteo problem. It's not a Dare County problem. It's not a Currituck problem. It's a we problem. It's a people problem. And I commend the town of Manteo and applaud you for the diversity of housing options that you do have. And in the proclamation that I asked you to adopt, you know, when we talk about fair housing, we need to really look at that diversity of housing. And what I have seen take place here is that we have driven single-family housing to the point that we have driven out the middle housing option, especially now in the last couple years. I mean, it has just exploded here with the land transfer tax that has been paid the last 2 years here. When we come right down to it, here in Dare County, in the towns, if money is the solution to our problem, we don't have a problem. But we have a problem that we do need to address, that I'm concerned in 5 years, in knowing that in the last 2 weeks, I fielded 7 phone calls of people asking, please, do you have a list of long-term rentals? We are being forced to move out of our property. Someone with a roofing company called me and said, hey, look, I got a guy on my crew. Is there any place in Manteo? You know, we're doing work in Rodanthe. We're putting these fortified roofs on through the NCIUA grant program. He's going to have to move if we can't find a place. Somebody lists a place on Facebook, and it's just, people are just contacting them. It was crazy what happened with one person listing a 1,600 square foot house for rent, and they were doing it on Facebook to find friends that knew somebody, and there'd be a personal reference. I know personally, working with those in the restaurant industry, that you list an office space, you might get one contact in 3 months to rent that office space. When you list an apartment that is a 600 square foot apartment, it was within minutes that people would be contacting you desperate to rent that apartment. And so we should not have anybody living in substandard housing here. You know, a lot of blame was put on the home builders should do it. Owners should do it. Well, the owner is responsible for their property, and they have private property rights to maximize the potential, you know, of their property. So when we're looking at this situation that we're in now, I think it's everybody coming to the table, and it's a we problem. And, I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to have a we problem to a we answer to solve it. And like I said, in 5 years, I'm kind of concerned about where we go here with, we get a Target at the beach. That Target's going to pull people from other businesses to work there because people just can't come here to live and work. So thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Nicole Northrup. I'm your planning board chair, and I just wanted to chirp in here that I think there's been a feeling in Manteo that we've been asked to do an awful lot. We really want to have affordable housing. I moved here from Nags Head, where I think you live, right? Because I got divorced and couldn't afford my house anymore. So I moved to Roanoke Village, which was super affordable, which is another great neighborhood that was built in Manteo. So we have the most affordable housing, and we really do want to work with the county, and we want to do it the Manteo way. That's the plan that we have with our current zoning and with the Manteo way of building. It's the citizens of Manteo, as we worked on our comprehensive plan, asked us, their primary concern is to keep the small town feel. And when you put a giant apartment complex in, that small town feel is gone. And that's kind of, I believe, what many folks objected to, was that there was not a whole lot of discussion with the commissioners, the planning board, on what type of housing. I think people love Bay Tree because it does the job, and it also fits well in what we perceive to be the Manteo way. So we want to take care of everyone. It's part of what Manteo is. It's a small town where we try to take care of everybody. But you can't take a stamp and take a plan that came out of Raleigh and plop it into Manteo, because it has to have the Manteo way. So I just wanted to share. Thank you.
I'm Rosemary Dosher, and don't live in Manteo, but I own a house over on Meekins. But I was a little disappointed because I've talked to some of the commissioners, and I was told when the public hearing was going to be held, y'all were going to try to get the county commissioners here with you. I just hope, since they're changing the plans for the Bowsertown property, that you will be more receptive. Y'all sit down together and let's work out something so we can get some kind of housing, and let's just do it, because it's been too long talking about that property and it's just sitting there. So please sit down together and consider what can be put there, and let's work it out. Thank you.
Are there additional comments?
Is there anyone else like to be heard? All right. We'll close the public comment period. Wait a minute, I'm going to say something. You know, we don't have an affordable housing problem, as been alluded to by several of the speakers. We got a housing problem. It's not affordable housing. I don't know many people in Manteo, and I'll speak to Manteo, not Dare County, that are living in rags to riches and houses that in shambles. I don't know of many of those houses. Maybe y'all do. But I think everybody lives pretty good in Manteo with the salaries and what's going on. I would like to say this, that we talked about, the gentleman earlier talked about quality of life in Manteo and small town Manteo. That's true. But I was a county commissioner for 21 years, and I fought a lot of things. And I can promise you this, I won't be here, but most of what we're talking about is going to come about with or without you. It will prevail. And I'm not saying I'm for it, not saying I'm against it. I'm just telling you facts of life. So that's where I stand. We're talking about Manteo being vibrant. It is very vibrant. If you go downtown any day of the week, as busy as it can be. The shops are busy, the waterfront's busy, everything's busy. You know what? I used to work for the governor, and I know about eastern North Carolina. There is not one town in eastern North Carolina that is not boarded up. Not boarded up. Business is dead. Nothing's going on. Not in Manteo. I wonder why that is. I just don't, I had to say it. You can get back with me if you want to, I don't care. Because I'm not running anymore, and that'll be it, and you put up somebody else and do what you want to. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with. I'm going to say it like it is, though. All right.
Mr.
That's
Mayor,
enough. Anybody else want to say anything as to public housing? They got that right, don't they? I'm in the board.
I just want to mention, I'm not fighting with you. Look, it's like, stop. This housing thing has really troubled me and troubled a lot of you guys because my generation, I keep talking to a lot of parents, a lot of people I went to high school with, and it makes me very sad what they say, especially when they want to have large families, and they're like, in 20 years, when our kid wants to come back from college, we're just going to have to move away with them and sell our house here because how can our 3 kids afford to come back here? I mean, you hear a lot of sad stories, but we have to do a lot of homework. Like, we're going to hear these stories. We're going to be the shoulder that our citizens can confide in, but we have to study other places. I watch a lot of meetings online. I went to our town attorney to ask if we could do a long-term tax incentive. That was a complex legal question that took me down a rabbit hole I didn't expect, but it opened up a door that could be explored. There's things that we can do. We just have to get creative. We have to look all over the country and the world if need be. And I know that a lot of, to your question about what type of housing, so far, I've talked to so many citizens, I literally pull people off the street. I roll my window down, hey, what kind of housing do you like? I asked a skateboarder, what do you think of the sidewalks the other day? He said, I just ate it back there. So the truth is, a lot of young people are like, I want a green space, I want a tiny home. Well, tiny homes create their own fun parking problem that I've discovered. So I hear single family housing is very popular, but we have limited land. You know, that we have a very complex problem. So I'm hoping that when we have our public forum, ideas will come forward, builders will give us advice. I've learned more about building recently than I ever thought I'd be interested in my life because it is difficult. It's difficult here, things are expensive here. So my only comment, or my comment in this is help us. Please give us ideas, do your homework with us. We are doing our homework, but we need a lot of brains in this because of our tiny island, so.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
From the board.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tag on to a couple things. I mean, it is a we problem. I think, you know, Willow and I had a conversation a year ago or so, and it's a realtor problem, it's a home builder problem, it's an owner problem, it's everybody at all levels. And Mr. Duke back there to go to his question that you were talking about and reiterate what the mayor said, it's all housing. I mean, it's all levels of housing. It's a inventory problem, and it's not totally unique to us here, but ours is a little bit unique in its way too. And I think, you know, I mean, also I do want to defend the town a little bit here, and you know, I think we got to check which water cooler we're hanging out on and getting our information from. We definitely did not shoot down the county, and we asked for further meetings and conversations to keep it alive, which it has. In fact, this public hearing was Daryl's idea to keep the conversation alive and bring ideas forth and see where the town wants us to go with the housing, because there are so many levels to it. So I think that the town and the board is open and willing, but it does have to fit the Manteo way. And, you know, that's super important to this town too, because it's, number one, maintain small town character, hometown sense of community and history. That's what Manteo is. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to tack on.
Anyone else? All right, we'll close the public hearing. I wanted the commissioners right to present themselves and say what they thought. Normally, we would have closed the public hearing right after we heard from the public, but I don't think that this is so important, as Jason said, it's our problem. And you know, I don't know how many went to the summit yesterday. Anybody go to the summit? Willie, you heard him. There's always a party of 5, 6, 8, 10 people, no-sayers, no to everything. And he just wrote a book, you should read it, 13 Ways How to Destroy Your Community. And it's very interesting. Should read it. So anyhow, I wanted the commissioner's right to be heard. So would anybody else like to be heard? All right, we'll now close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, if you'll get a motion to close that public hearing, please.
Do what?
A motion to close it.
Okay, we'll have to have a motion.
I move to close the public hearing.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. We close the public hearing on affordable housing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We now are closed. Melissa, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Item 7B on your agenda is the public hearing on a zoning permit application for a change of use at 716 South Highway 64. And so this is the opportunity that we would hear from the public on this agenda item. And I can do a review of it now if you like. I think that might be better. And then we can hear from the public, and then you all will deliberate on the issue later.
All right, let's get it over with. Go ahead.
Okay. If you could pull up the site plan. While Woody is getting the site plan up, I'll just go ahead. So staff are in receipt of a zoning permit application for a change of use request for 716 South Highway 64. The most recent use of this building has been a restaurant use, as the most recent tenant of the building was Big Al's. The applicant is requesting a change of use to convert the space into an animal boarding facility. So typically, this is different because you all don't typically have these change of use applications come to you. They do come to you if the site plan is changing, and of course, in this matter, it is. So that is why you all, per the ordinance, are the approving authority. But it did get referred to the planning board, and at their March 8th, 2022 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board recommended approval of this change of use request to you all. I attached the application, and the site plan is coming. So I will add that in this matter, we have had great communication about this. The first time the site plan was submitted, there was a buffer that on the detail looked correct, but it had not been added to the site plan. So they went back and they made those adjustments, and so now there is a complete buffer. We did send out adjacent property owner notifications. The property owner to the south, where Kelly's Automotive is located, requested a meeting with me on Monday. We met. He had some items that I was able to share with the representative of the owner, and they are happy to take care of those concerns. In particular, the dumpster enclosure that is now dilapidated. The posts are on the property, the adjacent property, not the property that conveys with this property. So they are willing to resolve that issue. And so that's the only thing that's really come up in all of these discussions. Brian Sewell is here, if you have anything to add.
Good evening. I'm Brian Sewell, house engineer, and hope you're all doing well. Want to thank everyone for making this process pretty painless, actually. Been a lot of comments back and forth, and at the planning board, the only real thing that we were concerned about was adding vegetation, but we've gone back out and done some little survey of the vegetation because we don't want oleanders and things like that are dangerous to your pets. So we've identified a few things that are mainly around the building that need to be removed, but we've gone along to meet the ordinance by adding other vegetation, primarily along Patty Lane, and incorporating the existing vegetation there, because we want that there. We want some shade for the dogs during the summer to be out and run around. So if you have any questions, that's pretty much it.
And they're going to deliberate at a different agenda item later, but if the public has anything to add about the application, now would be the appropriate time to weigh in.
And I think also the commissioners, if they had any questions, the gentlemen, they should go ahead and ask them now too.
Would you like a motion for a public hearing?
Sure, to open it.
Yep. Did we already do that? Did we already do that? No, you have. There you go. I move to open public hearing on zoning permit application for change of use at 716 South Highway 64.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the, you said approve the application, yeah.
To open.
Public comment.
Oh, yeah. All right, you've heard the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries.
So if there are comments, we'd love to hear them.
All right.
We
Go
can
ahead.
close the public hearing.
I'll move to close the public hearing on zoning permit application for change of use at 716 South Highway 64.
All right, all right. There's a
Second.
motion to close public hearing. There is a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I was waiting for Melissa to say something, but it's all right.
I'm
All right, the motion carries. Motion, it's closed.
Item 8 on your agenda is new business. Item 8A is consideration of the zoning permit application for which you just held a public hearing. So now this is before you all for deliberation.
All right.
I think this is a no-brainer here. I just like to move to approve the change in use of 716 South Highway 64-264.
All right, a second to Darrell's
Second.
motion.
Sure.
Okay. The motion is second that we approve the consideration zoning permit for 716 South. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, item 8B under new business is a quasi-judicial hearing on special use permit application for a mixed-use residential commercial building at 100 Old Tom Avenue.
All right, for private reasons, I'm going to recuse myself from this hearing, and the Mayor Pro Tem will be in charge, and so I recuse myself. Mayor Pro Tem, it's up to you.
I'll make a motion to open the quasi-judicial hearing on special use permit application for mixed residential commercial building use at 100 Old Tom Avenue.
Second.
Yes, Ms. Mayor Pro Tem, I'll be glad to manage this hearing. If you'll please bear with me, I've been up since about 4 and was in Durham at the Court of Appeals earlier today, and I didn't think I was going to be with you tonight, but I made it. I normally would cut this a little bit shorter, but since I'm not in the best of thought processes, I'm going to read through this commentary here that helps explain what we're doing, and that way I don't miss anything. But the purpose of this quasi-judicial hearing is for the board to determine whether or not a special use permit should be granted to Old Town Properties LLC. As a brief overview of the quasi-judicial hearing process for those who may not be familiar with it, and as a reminder to those who are familiar, in reviewing a SUP application, the Board of Commissioners is a formal quasi-judicial board which operates under strict rules and procedures which are set forth by statute in a fashion similar to a court of law. The board's decisions must be based upon substantial, competent, and material factual evidence presented under oath at this hearing. While the board is not strictly bound by the courtroom rules of evidence, they are guided by those rules and the general statutes as to what evidence is admissible. Hearsay, generalization, speculation, and most lay witness opinions may be subject to objections, precluding them from being considered in the board's decision-making process. In that regard, we ask that witnesses restrict their testimony to only factual information that is relevant to the limited issues under consideration. Testimony by all witnesses must be given under oath or affirmation. All witnesses must go to the lectern and identify themselves in order to provide their testimony. No other discussion by the audience is allowed. Any physical evidence presented will be made a part of the official record of the proceedings and will be retained by the board. The initial parties are the applicant and the town. Parties may object to testimony and cross-examine one another's witnesses and members of the general public who provide testimony. Parties will be provided an opportunity for brief closing arguments, questioning, objections, and the argument must come from your attorney or the applicant themselves, not someone appearing for them, such as an engineer, architect, or surveyor. Absent the granting of a formal motion to intervene, no members of the general public may question witnesses, object, or make arguments to the board. They can still provide witness testimony, but they're not a party. It's imperative, too, that no member of the board participate in the vote or any quasi-judicial matter in which the matter would violate an affected person's constitutional rights to an impartial decision-maker. Partial violations or impermissible violations due process include, but are not limited to, having a fixed opinion prior to hearing the matter that is not susceptible to change, undisclosed ex parte communications, and having a close familial, business, or other associational relationship with an affected person or financial interest in the outcome of the matter. Is there anyone who has any potential conflicts other than the mayor who's already recused himself? All right, seeing none. It's a quick roadmap for the process for the hearing. It's the town's intention to provide all parties to this hearing with the opportunity to cross-examine adverse witnesses and to offer evidence in support of their position and in rebuttal of their opponents. Because this is an application for a special use permit, the applicant will have the burden of making their case. However, town staff will testify first in order to provide an overview of the application. Once staff has completed their evidence, the applicant will have an opportunity to provide evidence. That evidence will be followed by the evidence of any other party if necessary. Then the general public will have an opportunity to provide evidence. Parties will then have an opportunity to provide brief rebuttal evidence if necessary. And upon conclusion of the evidence, the parties will have an opportunity to make brief arguments summarizing their positions. The board may, but is not required to make a final decision tonight. The board will deliberate on the issues in the case and attempt to reach a decision whether to grant the SUP, deny the SUP, or grant the SUP with reasonable conditions. The board shall issue the requested special use permit unless they conclude, based on information submitted at the hearing, that 1, the requested permit is not within its jurisdiction, or 2, the application is incomplete, or 3, if completed as proposed in the application, the development will not comply with one or more requirements of the ordinance. Essentially, if you meet the requirements of the ordinance, then you shall grant the permit. The board may also deny the SUP if granting the SUP would not be in conformity with the town's land use plan or latest guidelines for development, or proposed use will not be compatible with the area in which it is located. If the proposed use is listed in the permissible uses in that zone, it's by law compatible with the area where it's located. The relevant requirements are those found in Article 7 of the town zoning ordinance for multifamily use in the B1 Village Business District where the property is located. The board shall not rely on or use any part of the preliminary forum or recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Board as a basis for its decision on the special use permit. So now we actually get to the hearing part. First, anyone who wishes to provide testimony, whether you're a party or a member of the public, if you could come forward and be sworn in by the clerk.
Okay, so I'm going to say I, and then you'll state your names individually, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I
Melissa Dickerson. Donna Creve.
Derek Hatch.
do solemnly swear that the testimony I'm about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I do.
Thank you very much, and we'll begin the hearing with the staff presentation.
Thank you, Town Attorney Gallup. First, I will start by submitting for the record the following exhibits. Exhibit A will be my staff report. Exhibit B will be the special use permit application. Exhibit C will be the site plan. Exhibit D will be the staff plan review comments. Exhibits E and F. E is the lighting plan and F is the landscape plan. And I want to note for the record that the version of the plan that should be entered into the record was received today, April the 6th, 2022 at 11:38 a.m. So, to my staff report. Staff are in receipt of an application, attachment 1, for a special use permit submitted by Old Town Properties LLC. The proposed development is to build a mixed residential commercial building with motel rooms on the first floor and apartments on the second and third floors located at 100 Old Tom Avenue on the former Evans Building site. The special use permit proposed site plan attachment 2 is included with the staff report. Adjacent property owners were notified by first-class mail of the application on February the 28th and March 25th. At the time of preparing the staff report, the planning department received 1 email in response to the adjacent property owner notifications. Public notices were published on March 20th, 2022 and March 27th, 2022. Planning department staff reviewed the site plan with the following staff members. At the time, it was the then town manager, water and sewer director, public works director, building inspector, and fire marshal. Staff plan review comments are provided in an attachment. Please note that these are the same staff review comments from the previously submitted special use permit application submitted by the same applicant. As required by the Town of Manteo zoning ordinance, the planning board is required to review the application for special use permit and shall submit its recommendation to approval or disapproval along with any conditions or safeguards it may consider necessary to the town commissioners. At their March 8th, 2022 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Board made a recommendation of approval of the special use permit application to the Board of Commissioners. The applicant submitted to staff a lighting plan and a landscaping plan that will need to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. Those have been provided and entered into the record. These plans will be reviewed by the Planning Board at their April 12th, 2022 meeting. Should the Board of Commissioners consider a recommendation of approval of the special use permit, in the staff report, I have provided a number of sample conditions that you may want to consider to the special use permit. Those are that the utilities are to be privately owned and maintained by the developers. The town's maintenance responsibility will end at the master meter for the water distribution system and the tie-in to the wastewater collection system. North Carolina DOT encroachment permit will be required for utility work on Fernando and Sir Walter Raleigh streets. Any work that impacts the access of Old Tom Avenue will need to be approved by the Town of Manteo. Dumpster locations and typical pad and screen details shall be identified and approved by the Public Works Director and Town Planner. A lighting plan that is in compliance with applicable ordinances shall be provided and approved by the Planning and Zoning Board. Again, we've received those, and they will be going to the next Planning Board meeting. Provide an as-built of the utility site plan. And finally, any necessary conditions noted in attachment 3, which is the staff plan review comments. That concludes my staff report.
Does anybody with the board have any questions for Ms. Dickerson? Does anybody with the applicant have any questions for Ms. Dickerson? Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Is there anyone else from the town who's going to testify, Ms. Dickerson?
No, sir.
And, is there anyone from the applicant who intends to testify?
Good evening. My name is Donna Creef, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Old Time Properties. Mr. Hatchell is one of the members of that LLC, and I'm just going to follow up on some of the things that the staff put in their comments. This is a site plan for a mixed-use structure at 100 Old Town Avenue. Currently, there are 2 structures on the property. One of the structures will be demolished and will be replaced with a 3-story building. The first floor of that building will be hotel units, and those hotel units are consistent with the definition that's in the zoning ordinance. It has an on-site office, on-site reception, and there are no cooktops or ranges or in any of the hotel units. The second and the third floor will be multifamily apartments. There will be 12 of those. The B1 zoning requires that mixed-use facilities like this have commercial on the first floor, and the hotel and the motel rooms are consistent with that requirement for for commercial use. There is language in the ordinance that talks about retail and food service being encouraged on the first floor of multifamily units, and I will say that encouraged is a suggestion. It's not a mandatory requirement, and so the use of the first floor for hotel rooms is consistent with the zoning ordinance. As Melissa said, we have submitted a landscaping and a lighting plan. The building will be 3 stories, and it will have a gross floor area that's less than the 20,000 square feet that is the limitation in the B1. Some of the comments that we heard earlier were that there was a loophole in the ordinance, and as I just said, that first floor is consistent with the zoning. It is hotel and motel. The uses are, the layout of the hotel rooms are consistent with that definition that's in the ordinance. And I'm going to stop right there, and if you guys have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If not, I'm going to sit back down and let you continue with your deliberations.
Does anyone with the board have any questions of Ms. Creef? Ms. Dickerson, do you have any questions for her?
I do not.
Do you have,
I got a question. What is the rates for the hotel rooms in the high season?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if they've got that far in the business plan, Councilman Collins. I think that they are in the business of hotel now. They have a hotel on the Causeway in Nags Head, and I dare say that they will be consistent with that. They're not going to do anything that's going to compete against themselves, and I'm sure that they will analyze the other hotel rooms that are in the area and that may be in downtown Manteo and offer something that's comparable.
What happens if this hotel fails, and would they be in violation of our ordinance?
it remains to be seen how that would work out. I mean, if you get a permit for something and then you stop doing that and you're not doing something else, then you don't need another permit. There's a lot of factual circumstances that would go into how that works out. You couldn't just do something different with it without potentially going through the change of use process and other things.
Are there any cooking facilities in the hotel rooms?
No, sir, there's not.
But for me, a hotel would be a standalone itself. I mean, there's no other building like this in the town of Manteo. I mean, it's completely different from everything that's been traditionally done in the town. I don't know how a person buying a hotel room would sleep at night, you know, maybe with kids running up and down upstairs and all this. And I mean, you might have a lot of complaints, I would imagine, mixing the two uses in that same building.
I've stayed in a lot of hotels where there were kids running around, so I will just say that the business plan is to have the hotel rooms on the first floor and have apartments on the second and third floor. And as we've heard at your own public hearing tonight about housing, that there is an acute need for housing. And the property owners are trying to do something that fits their business plan, but also gives back to the community and addresses a need. They're business owners as well, and they have need for housing for their employees as well. And so they think that this is something that will work for them, and it's consistent with the ordinance. And I don't know how else to address questions that are, you know, of a what-if nature. What if it fails? What if there's, you know, what if there's people who have issues with the hotel, well, then they won't come back and stay there. But that's, in my opinion, not a reason to turn down the special use permit. Your attorney has indicated that there's criteria that you have to apply to turn this down. And it is consistent, in my opinion, that with the ordinance and that it should be approved.
Any other questions for Ms. Creek?
I just have maybe a comment, yeah. I'm not sure it's a question, could be. It's around this consistency of the ordinance. And I just feel like there's some ambiguity in the ordinance. And I just wanted to throw it out there because it's confusing to me. So in the ordinance, it says that all proposed development in the B1 Village Business District shall be consistent with the principles stated in the Town of Manteo Plan Update. And the adopted design guidelines, entitled Design Guidelines, the Manteo Way of Building, particularly downtown waterfront, where differences occur over interpretation of uses and requirements set forth in the zoning regulations, the plan shall be used as a guide for resolving the conflicting points of view. So when I look at this, I see the conditional uses permitted listed in section 7-5, and there are hotels, motels, although we only have a definition for hotel in our ordinance. But it does mention the multifamily, which is what this is, the multifamily dwelling units, as long as the first floor is commercial use, retail and food services are encouraged on the first floor. That is also consistent with the plan update from 2005. And I can tell you there was a group of about 17 of us who tore that plan update apart for the past 2 years, looking at it and what the intention of it was, what the wording is. And so I feel like there is a difference between what this says in our ordinance that I just mentioned. And so I'm feeling like maybe we need to go back, as this says, and review the plan update to make sure it is not inconsistent.
I'm going to let the attorney address
Me too.
that. Yeah.
I'm going to
yeah.
let the attorney talk about that.
I don't personally see much ambiguity in the way the use provision is. I think if you look at the ordinance, a hotel is commercial. The encouragement question is, the easy answer is if the town in adopting this legislation had wanted to have retail, or what's the other term?
Retail and food service.
Retail or food service, it would have said, instead of commercial, it would have said must have retail or food service on the bottom floor. And so I don't think there's any ambiguity in the ordinance as to that a hotel is commercial as the ordinance is put together. And unfortunately, you also have to resolve ambiguities in favor of the free use of land. So when it's unclear, it resolves in the favor of the applicant. And I don't think there is any ambiguity in this particular case. And I thought I also heard you say that the language was consistent with the plan that you were talking about looking at.
The plan update?
Yeah.
The plan update, in us 17 of us ripping that apart and looking at it and reviewing it, I can't point to a page, but the intention, from what I remember, was that we would continue the retail on the bottom because of the commitment to tourism. So I think it's an important thing to bring up because I do think that there's an inconsistency in it. I think there are some people here who also were on that group who looked at that. So I think it needs to be stated and maybe reviewed.
We could ask Ms. Dickerson if she has any indications of inconsistencies with the plan, or you could continue the hearing and have further testimony on the plan at another hearing. But I think for tonight, I don't know that there's anybody here to testify about it other than Ms. Dickerson and Ms. Creef.
I will say that, and Mr. Gallup can correct me if I'm wrong, but under North Carolina law, that when you go in and you have a zoning ordinance that's on the books now, and the local government decides to go in and change that, and there is a permit that's in the process, which this is certainly in the process, that if you change that the applicant has the ability to say, you know what, that's great that you're changing it, but I want to be considered under this old rule. And so if there is an inconsistency with the way that you feel that the ordinance is being applied, then it needs to be changed, but it shouldn't be changed and held against the applicant tonight, because the attorney has said very clearly that there is no ambiguity in that language that says retail and food service is encouraged, is what the language is today, and encouraged is a very important word in land use. It's not mandatory.
And that wasn't the...
Yeah,
And I may have misunderstood where you were going with the consistency of the update there.
Yeah, it was...
I would agree with Ms. Creef on the law, but I don't think that's what you were talking
No,
about.
it wasn't.
I think
And I
what you were
apologize
talking
for
about
that,
was
yeah.
reviewing the plan to see if it was consistent
The
with
plan update,
or reviewing the application to see if it was consistent with the plan update, which would be different than changing, than recognizing that there is something that you did not want in the ordinance and would like to change that. Of course, if that is the case, which it may be, then their application would be in the pipeline already, and you would be stuck with their application or whichever one that they preferred to use, the new or the old. But I don't think that's what you were talking about.
agreed, yeah.
Any other questions for Ms. Creef?
I think my question is more for you. So I can wait if anybody has any questions while you're up there, or if there's anybody else wants to speak. I guess my question is where that, because it sounds like the 20-year plan and update to the 20-year plan is, you know, that's pretty clear too, and doesn't necessarily match up to the ordinance. So where does that fit in legally in terms of direction on this?
I think that the ordinance prevails over the plan if there's an inconsistency between the two. The ordinance is the higher form of legislation.
Yeah.
Even though
So if the plan says, you know, we'd prefer to continue to have retail, I don't think that's inconsistent with what the ordinance says. I think it says retail is encouraged and we'd prefer to have retail, but it doesn't say you have to have retail. So I don't necessarily see that as an inconsistency. And I think if the plan says you have to have retail, but the ordinance says you don't have to have retail, then those two are inconsistent and the ordinance would prevail over the plan.
Go ahead.
even though, as Melissa had showed us, that the plan update is not just a plan, it's one of the 5 tools, just like the book of ordinances is. It's one of the 5 tools that we make our decisions on.
Yes, and typically it's more of a guide for legislation than it is for permitting. You do have some regulations that allow for consideration in permitting with conformity, but I would say that if it's in conformity with the ordinance and there's a provision that's contrary to that in the plan, I would say that would be a risky decision to have the plan preempt the ordinance rather than the ordinance preempt the plan.
You are the attorney.
Not always a very good one, but that's where I'm stuck at this point. Is there any other questions for, Ms. Creef sat down. Ms. Creef, is there anybody else who intends to testify for the applicant? Moving on, is there, nobody was sworn from the public, but I will ask if there are any members of the public who wish to be sworn and wish to provide, again, relevant factual testimony, not, well, we would love to have a venting session about whether you like it or don't like it, or make arguments. That's not what the special use permit hearings are about. They're about providing evidence about whether or not it does or does not meet the requirements of the ordinance. Is there anyone who wishes to speak as a member of the public? If you'll raise your hand and come forward and be sworn. Seeing no one. Is there any additional evidence that you have, Ms. Dickerson?
No.
Ms. Creef? I would close the evidentiary portion of the hearing at this point and open it for consideration by the board.
Make a motion to close the quasi-judicial hearing on special use permit application for mixed residential commercial building at 100 Old Tom Avenue.
Second.
Do we need to approve or question there?
So you can do, now you would be considering the answer. You can move to approve, you can move to deny, or you can move to approve with conditions.
Before we close the hearing?
Before, I think it's fine to, there's an evidentiary portion of the hearing, and I think the consideration is fine now. If you have additional questions for witnesses, once you start considering, we can reopen the evidentiary portion of the hearing. And if I could, if someone does decide to make a motion, if I could have a brief comment about it, if it ends up being a motion to approve, there's some language I'd like to add.
I'll make a comment. In my opinion, it meets the ordinance. Whether we like it or not, that's up to the owner of that business. But as far as I can tell, it meets the ordinance. It's a commercial building. It has residential above it. We do have a residential housing issue. The upstairs portion would help that. The downstairs, it's commercial, whether they want to have a restaurant, a dress shop, a barber shop, or any other commercial building, that's up to them. So I don't see where it's anything we can deny, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it, while it certainly doesn't seem to meet intent from the 20-year plan or these things that are supposed to guide us right in front of us on, maintaining small-town character, I don't know if that's to say it's, I wonder if we just have a case of our ordinance letting us down and creating a loophole which, needs to be fixed immediately before another permit comes in, if that's the direction this goes. But
Is it time to move to approve it, or whatever?
You could, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, I move that we approve this special use permit as presented.
And Madam Mayor Pro Tem, could I ask that, would you like to adopt the findings of fact that are as presented by staff and Ms. Creef in support of that, and adopt the conditions that Ms. Dickerson proposed?
Yes, I move to adopt all that the attorney said.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Well, I'd like to add to that, to add all the conditions that the staff report recommended to be put into this motion.
And that was part of her motion. I had asked her to do that.
Yeah. All in favor?
Well, let me say something. This is kind of eroding the tradition of the town of Manteo. The ordinance was written at a time when, I don't know how to say this, but when people were more maybe forthright, you might say. So this is for me, this is the end of a tradition for the town of Manteo, especially in that district. And like you said, maybe our ordinance did let us down this time. And I think the planning and zoning board should maybe try to beef up our zoning ordinances to maybe to get rid of something that this might come up again. That's all I got to say.
Okay, all in favor, it's been put on the floor.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Motion has passed. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you want to come back?
Yeah. Well, I gotta tell you why.
Okay. Well, you use it, Jamie.
All right, Jamie. What's the next?
Yes, sir. I lost the second page of my agenda,
I
just a
had
second.
two, that's why I asked you.
Item 8C, under new business, is consideration of Magnolia Pavilion proposal. And I'll take it away, if that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor. At your March 21st, 2022 meeting, the Town of Manteo Board of Commissioners heard comment from Mr. Bill Miller, who indicated that he and his family were interested in leasing Magnolia Pavilion from the town. Previously, last October, the town issued a request for proposal for Magnolia Pavilion. At that time, one entity responded to the request, and staff have been working with legal counsel on developing and improving that lease document. Following the March 21st meeting, I emailed the respondent to last fall's request for proposal and received no follow-up response from them. After a week, town staff met with Mr. Miller to discuss his proposal. Following the meeting, Mr. Woody took Mr. Miller for a tour of Magnolia Pavilion because he had not been able to get into the enclosed space that was locked and such. So they were able to take a tour, and Mr. Miller has followed up and indicated his interest in pursuing a lease at Magnolia Pavilion. And attached to the staff report was the proposal that Mr. Miller provided at the last commissioner meeting. Mr. Miller is here, and I believe, do you have a proposal? I mean, you have a presentation, or you want to speak at this time, or be available to answer any questions?
Sure. My name is Bill Miller, and my family and I have been coming to Manteo since about 2006 when one of our sons was an actor at the Lost Colony, and then followed by a second son, and we now all live down here. So we have 4 children, and some are in and out, but we're here, and we're interested in being, an important part of the community hopefully one day, and use our talents. Our children are all adults now. They're business people and involved in different aspects of law and other fields. So, I think we did submit our proposal. We're looking to rent the entirety of the property and basically put a market in that would be, I think, beneficial to the community, the other businesses in the area, the arts, and so forth. And our plan was to take the existing shop, improve it. There are some, drawbacks to the property. As some of you may know, it's below floodplain, so it creates we have some issues with relative to refrigeration. We have to elevate it about 4 feet off the ground, and, so we're working on we're devising some ways to work around that restriction. But as Melissa said, we met. I'm fully aware of you know, the drawbacks to the facility, as are my children and my wife, and, you know, we're prepared to move forward. I think, yeah, so that's where we are. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Well, Mr. Miller, I'd like to welcome you to the town of Manteo, and thank you for breathing life in our Magnolia Pavilion. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Look forward to it.
Any improvement will be an improvement. But congratulations. Listen, what do we got?
Well, if you all have questions or comments for me, I'd be happy to answer those. One thing that I would like to reiterate, the property is below, the floor of the building is below base flood. So because of that, a 50% rule applies. So Mr. Miller would be limited on the amount of improvements that he could make to the building, and the building would not be able to be conditioned space.
Mr. Miller, I have lived here all, you don't have to stand, don't sit down. I've lived here all my life and contended with floods and storms, and I don't know how many storms and how many floods. But you can believe one thing, and anybody sitting in this audience thinks Manteo is not going to flood, you just well get up and leave now. Because sooner or later, you're going to get wet. We keep talking about floodplains and storms and floods. We live in it. It's part of us. And I keep reading about Norfolk. What are they going to do about stopping the floodwaters and everything? I would love to know. There's only one person knows that, and he's up there.
Amen.
We ain't going to stop floodwaters unless we do like Denmark or Sweden, somewhere over there, and build the dikes. And I don't think we can afford it, because we're in trouble right now financially. Not us, but the country. But anyhow, good luck, and you'll learn to live with the storms and the flood and be like the rest of us.
That's right. Thank you.
So, Melissa, do we know what the value, so that 50% rule in terms of, you know, what they can do, what is the value on the structure that they have to work with?
The tax appraisal value is, I haven't looked at it today, but I believe it's around $50,000. So we've talked about, you know, staying under $25,000 for any improvements.
Okay. And that is enough for what you need to do? Yes. Sorry, up, down, up, down.
Let's talk about this 30-year, 3+ 30-year lease. That's a long time.
Sure. So Mr. Miller has proposed a lease term that will be 3 years with 3 10-year renewal options. And that is one point that I want to bring to your attention, is that would be a considerably long-term use of the building that we know is located below base flood. And I believe that there had been some conversation with the previous board and the last budget development about appropriating some dollars to reimagine that area of town. And so that is something for you all to consider.
It's a long time.
It is a long time.
But won't that be down the road, Melissa?
Well, so they would have, the proposed term is 3 years, and then the renewal options. So it would be 3 years, we would be at a point where we would need to.
Well, that would be doable, 3 years with the renewal option, because the renewal option would come up after the third year, right?
Yes, sir. And then, Town Attorney Gallup, maybe you need to help me here, but I would think at that point, the matter would go back before the board.
I'd have to see the language of the lease. I think for tonight, probably the best thing is to, if you would like this to go forward, is to authorize Melissa to negotiate with Mr. William?
Miller.
Miller. I knew it had 2 L's. With Mr. Miller to get the best thing that he can do, and then to come back to you with that. And it may be, and once that's on paper, we can see what it actually means. And if you have some changes you want to make to it to propose back to Mr. Miller at that point, then we could go from there. But I think the first place to start is getting something on paper that I can look at, or one of my partners can look at, to see what that means and how it would pan out. It really depends on whose option it is to renew. Is it your option to renew, or is it their option to renew? And my guess is it's their option to renew if they're proposing it and want to have that time frame. And so that might make it so that you couldn't renew. But is there a termination clause where you can breach it at some point, or break it at some point to do something else? And so all that's negotiable and something that could be put in the lease, but I think you want to start with something on paper so that we can look at it and see whether or not we have any issues with it.
Okay, do we need to just wait till the next meeting or till the lease gets, so we can get clearer language?
I think you would want to do it, what Ms. Dickerson's asking is authorizing her to negotiate a lease with Mr. Miller and bring it back to you.
And I would bring it back to you for
Yeah,
approval.
that'd be the thing to do. Is the board agreeable to that? Let Melissa handle it and then bring it back to us.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add on there is, I mean, we did pre-COVID talk about, a kind of pre-conversation on the opportunity with that space, and, then the world shut down and we stopped talking about it and other things took priority. And so I don't think that that's a conversation that may not happen again, where everybody talk from everything from park space to build it up more, but luckily that would be, you'd see it coming because it's all public record and what we talk about. But I think that it's a great use of the space now, and even if we decided to do something different with it, then you'd have a couple of, 3 years before something actually happens. So, yeah, that's the only thing, just kind of context I wanted to provide.
My comment is I think it's great. I want somebody to be in that space. I want you to negotiate with them. My only fear is I don't want to lock in future boards into a deal we made, if that makes sense. There'll be potentially half of us going in 2 years, and who knows here in 30 years, certainly not any of us. But the lease agreement options would be my areas of concern, but I want somebody to be in that space.
Anyone else? Okay, Melissa, I think you're hearing from the board. You take it and handle it, then come back to us with it.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Do you need a motion to negotiate a lease, or is it just direction?
I think you've got consensus that you're not approving anything tonight, and I didn't hear anybody objecting, so I think you've got consensus for her to go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
All right.
item number 9 on your agenda is mayor and commissioner comments.
All right, I got one we've almost forgotten, Willow's proclamation. I understand most of the times it's passed the proclamation, haven't the Willow? And do we have the proclamation? We do, don't we?
I have a copy of it, and we can have it on your agenda for April the 20th.
Well, when do you want it, Willow?
It is convenient to do it at your next meeting.
Will we have time by the next meeting? Okay. That's all right. Okay, we'll table it until the next meeting, Melissa. All right, comments? I don't have any. Sherry?
Yes, I do have a comment. Actually, it's more of a question for Melissa, and that is, given that these funds are available through the Department of Environmental Quality's Division of Air Quality, and I think there's more than $1 million in rebates available, I think the timeline is coming up, and I just wanted to make sure that we are going to be able to try to tap into those funds so we can get the electric charging stations.
Yes, so this week, Michelle attended a webinar regarding those grant dollars, and so we are, because of the transition, in order to apply for that grant, we have to get the user IDs to the NCID, which is the way to get in to make the application. So we are working with the relevant state departments, the treasurer's office, in order to add the necessary users so Michelle can go ahead and make that application. But she's seen what the application form looks like. She is preparing that. She is working on it. She did the webinar, I think it was Tuesday. Monday. Yes. So we're going to be ready to respond as long as we get all of our login issues resolved.
Please do.
We plan to apply immediately once it's open.
And what I didn't know, I knew that the webinar was on Monday, but what I didn't know was, can we apply for multiple
Yes.
units up to 2, is it?
Yes, you can apply for multiple charters at multiple locations.
Okay. And then after this $1,040,000 is exhausted, isn't there more money that's coming down the pipeline?
Potentially.
Yeah.
There's
And-
no confirmation. Okay. That's why we plan to respond as soon as the application is available.
And then when would we be able to actually install them, given that we would be successful, fingers crossed?
You all, so if we are successful in our grant application, you all would then authorize us to sign, or me to sign, a grant contract. And so there is a process that will follow once we receive the approval.
And of course, I'm thinking of the timeline that we all have in mind about Manteo becoming a Main Street America city and wanting to have as many amenities as possible. So,
Sure.
good job. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Betty?
Thank you, Willa. Thank you, Willa. That's all.
That it?
Mhm.
Eddie?
I want to thank everybody for coming. We have a pretty full house for what we normally have. I know there's a lot of interest. Sometimes there are some things that we do that even we may not necessarily agree with the intent, but by the letter of, I call it the letter of the law, it's really the ordinance. By what it is, if it fits, then that's what I'm going to go with. But I think we have a lot of interest in Manteo, commercial, residential. We have a good problem here. There's a lot of people that are interested in developing here, spending money here, infrastructure, the college. So I'm thankful that we have full audiences like this to give us some input. I appreciate everybody's opinion, and I appreciate the guys putting in building applications, even the ones we deny. I'm thankful there's that much interest here moving forward. I think the worst thing we could ever have is an empty audience. So I'm glad there's a lot of participation here. So thank you all for coming.
Ruth?
As we enter Holy Week, I would like to just give God the glory for all the cool things that are happening in this area, and thank Jesus for his awesome sacrifice. That's all.
Jason?
Yeah, I think to Daryl's point earlier and Daddy's point just now, we gotta do the right thing to, the law of the land there. I think that's an unfortunate one that we had to let through today. And I want to make sure it doesn't open up avenues to, the retail is retails, restaurants, that's a lot of our character. I always look at two pillars of the character of Manteo. One is that people live here, it's not as, there's neighborhoods, there's community, it's an incredible community, and the other is the business community. And that's largely the restaurants and retail, and I'd hate for, us to open something up that becomes, okay, now we've got more, we lose retail all over below, and we become the suburbs of the beach. And from a financial standpoint, Manteo, the business owners, the property owners will be fine, but we lose that number one driving thing that sits in front of us, maintain small town character. And I just want to make sure that our ordinances reflect the 20-year plan and the land use and the intent of a community that works really hard to be heard. And I think, like I said, I think we did the right thing tonight, but I think it is inconsistent with what Manteo tries to be. So.
Yeah?
I agree with Jason. And maybe the planning and zoning board has some work to do to shore up our ordinances. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Anything else come before the board? All right, when do we got to have a motion, when do we, meet?
Mr. Mayor, you are recessing until tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
What happens tomorrow?
Your budget prioritization.
Oh, that's right.
Make a motion that we recess until tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Second.
All right, the motion that we adjourn to tomorrow. What time?
10 a.m.
10 a.m., all right. We stand adjourned.